Welcome everybody to our Thursday webinar, August 24th. With us today, we've got Whitney Ondrejcka, Channel Manager from Kustomer. Whitney, why don't you just give us a quick introduction of yourself?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Whitney Ondrejcka. I'm the Channel Account Manager for Kustomer for the West, which means I work with our partners who are headquartered in Colorado or so over. I've been with Kustomer for about just over a year and a half now. And in this industry as a whole since 2016, and my history and experience in being in the industry has really focused on customer experience as a whole, chatbots, voice bots, and really had a lot of interest in how we can be incorporating AI to draw efficiencies. So really excited about this webinar.
Perfect. Thank you, Whitney. And we also have Mike Dolloff, our CRO here at InflowCX. Mike, can you give us a quick intro for those who don't know you?
Yeah, glad to be on. And Mike Dolloff, coming out of dialed in here from Portland, Oregon area. Been with Inflow about 9 years, and I've really been in kind of the contact center tech space for most of my career, so about 15 years. And love talking about this topic we've got today. A lot of buzz with AI, and so hopefully cut through a lot of that noise and have a good conversation.
Perfect. Thank you both. And for those of you who have joined us as we start to trickle in here, today we have a fireside chat format. We're going to be chatting through how AI is fueling the CX revolution. So certainly a hot button topic. I know that AI has become forefront and center in a lot of CX conversations, and as such, it's something that we here at InflowCX have a lot of conversations, a lot of different customers calling in and saying, "Hey, I'm just really confused as to what's going on here. Can you help guide me through this process?" So yeah, just a quick intro to Kustomer. Kustomer is one of our key technology partners. It's a modern agent platform that unifies data into a single pane of glass so agents can get a clear 360-degree view of a customer, allowing them to create a more personalized, efficient experiences. So pretty loaded stuff there, and excited to dive in. And again, for those who are new to Inflow, we are an organization that helps evaluate, deploy, and optimize customer engagement solutions. We have a very vendor agnostic approach. As such, we can really guide customers in what makes the most sense from a technology perspective through our CCaaS solutions, AI, UC, WFO, outsourcing automation, and much more. So excited to dive in here. But before we get started, for the audience, we're going to open it up for a quick poll. And a note to the audience, Kustomer has agreed to graciously give out a Yeti cooler to each participant that participates in the actual poll itself. So by all means, feel free to get your vote in there, and we'll get started here in just a second. So this first poll question we have: how do you rate yourself with the adoption of AI within your organization relative to the rest of the market on a scale of 1 to 10? So we'll give this about 10 to 15 seconds, and we'll close that up, Kylie, and get some results. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, as we go through the presentation, if you do have questions, by all means, feel free to populate those in there. We'll address those as we move about, and we also will have an open Q&A timeframe at the end for open questions for both Whitney and Mike. So why don't we go ahead and close out the poll, and let's pop up the results here.
All over the board.
Yeah. Pretty varying results here, but I think that's the nice thing about this conversation is being able to dive in and shed some more light on the situation. So with that said, why don't we go straight into the mix here? Question number one, Whitney, we'll have you lead this off, but how have changing consumer expectations influenced AI in CX?
Yeah, no, great question. And thank you everybody for participating in that poll. A lot of insight that we can take away from that. I saw that there was actually quite a bit for stage 1 and 2 in terms of how far you were on the adoption scale. Also quite a bit for stage 7 out of 10. I don't think I remember seeing any 9s or 10s. So very interesting on that. Just goes to show you that there's still a good amount to learn. We're all still learning. There's things that are being introduced every single day. So, but yeah, getting back to the question about changing consumer expectations and how that is influencing AI in customer experience. So I always like to think about consumers themselves, right? It's always important to first take a look at them and how they've changed and how companies have modified their approach to CX in order to meet customers in the way that they expect to be met. So consumers are so much different today than they were 5 to 10 years ago, even 2 to 3 years ago, right? So one of the things that I wanted to highlight on this question is consumers today are certainly getting harder to please. And that's because of what we've dubbed as, this me economy, right? So consumers have higher expectations. They want to self-serve. And this really is a must. It's not an option today. Digitalization and AI-powered self-service functionality like chatbots or knowledge-based articles, having a refined FAQ. These are things that consumers absolutely expect today. I would say another thing would be personalization, right? So know who I am when I reach out to your company. And having a robust CRM that's actionable added with AI can really help tremendously with that. Another component is to allow consumers to engage with your company in the channel of their choice. So we've heard this a lot, right? Because thinking about the modern consumer today, they have a different expectation. They want to be able to communicate with your company via web chat or SMS or WhatsApp, or potentially even Instagram Messenger or Facebook Messenger. So companies really need to focus on ways that they can meet those customers in the channel of their choice. And this goes beyond multi-channel offerings. It's really an omni-channel offering. So consumers should not have to identify who they are again and again if they are switching from one channel to another. If I reach out via web chat and I'm in the middle of a conversation, but I need to pick up my daughter from school, I want to be able to continue that conversation via SMS or, hey, can you send me an email about this? So that kind of offering should be consistent with brands. And then just in general, overall, customers are expecting this low friction experience, right? So a lot of you have heard the name Shep Hyken before. He's very focused on customer experience, customer service. What he talks about is convenience is king and queen, right? So customers are going to be open to paying more and doing more business with a brand and being more loyal to a brand if it's easy to get things done. So I'll just say in general, offering that low friction experience, that is part of what the expectation of the me economy is today.
No, I appreciate that, Whitney. I think from a personal level, it's kind of interesting when I contact a contact center and I don't have those expectations, the experience is so dramatically different. But anyway, Mike, kind of turning the tables over to yourself. Maybe you could give us a quick readout on your thoughts on expectations from influenced AI and CX.
Yeah, I think, by the way, the me economy, that's what I live in my household with my kids. That's what I think they subscribe to that as well. So they're future consumers. I think that the big thing driving this, right, is you touched on this, Whitney. There's basically exponential expectations from customers, right? Mm-hmm. And yet on the company side, right, if you're in the contact center or on the company delivering, you have finite resources. And so customers are expecting this better, faster, more personalized engagement. And if you're not, in a lot of what a company's trying to focus on right now is, yes, I need to figure out how to solve that, but I also need to find efficiencies and I need to reduce or manage my costs. So if you continue on status quo, these lines don't match up right. And this is really where I think AI enters the mix, right? The idea of like self-service and gaining efficiencies is nothing new, but AI now puts kind of a bunch of potential that we never had before around that. But I'll put a point on it saying this, like AI, when it comes to consumer expectations, it's not the panacea, right? It's not going to solve every single thing. You still need, great hiring practices and great employee engagement practices and all this, but it's a key ingredient, right? It's really key to balance out what is really competing realities, right? Of these customers demanding more or engaging more, and the finite resources that you have to deal to use, right?
No, I appreciate that, Mike. Yeah, I think those are both very, very good responses there, and hopefully the audience can generate some questions out of this. But let's move to our next poll. Again, a reminder: participate in the poll, have an opportunity to win a Yeti cooler. So get your answers in. We'll leave this open for about 10 seconds.
Yeah, we've got 3 of those. So 3 Yeti coolers. We've got 3 poll questions. So make sure to participate.
I have a Yeti cooler, and I can confirm it's like my favorite thing for the summer. Like, that thing's awesome. That thing gets a lot of use. So
and just think of the amount of bears that cannot get into your cooler as a result of those lockdown handles.
Those are serious heavy duty zippers also on the Yeti coolers. Like,
yes.
no water's getting out of those. So
yes.
All right, we'll give this 3, 2, 1. Let's go ahead and wrap that up. Let's populate some results. So again, how many systems do your agents use to service their customers? So it's actually on the lower side, which is that's an insightful response, but there's still a number of folks out there that have 5+. So there still are a lot of contact centers out there that have agents having to deal with a lot of situations, a lot of systems out there when they're providing customer service to their employee or their customers. So let's jump into the next question here. Mike, let's start off with you this time. Why are companies maintaining the status quo, or what are the challenges in the landscape?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple things that we're hearing from customers. First off, I say this because our marketing's team on, but marketers always ruin everything, right? I mean, that we can all agree on that, I think, right? And I mean, there's so much buzz and noise getting created right now around AI. And so this just creates a ton of confusion. Even this morning I was on a call, right? And we were talking about, we really have to like make sure we're all talking what this word means 10 different things to different people. Actually, contact center and tech has always had this problem. AI is like, gas on the fire for it. So we spend a lot of time educating customers because this stuff, Whitney talked about it, this stuff is new. It's ever evolving. I'm immersed in it. Rich, you're immersed in it. Whitney, you're immersed in it every day. And it's still complex for us, right? And we get to live and breathe it. So think about, customers and people operating contact center, working in IT that have lots of other hats they're wearing to try to get your head around all of this, where to start. So it's overwhelming. And so they're kind of one of the areas is like, cut through all this noise and like, let's break AI and contact center customer experience down into common language of understanding. Let's get away from just the buzzwords that everyone says, but I'm actually not really sure what that means or what that's supposed to mean. Let's like really clearly make sure we understand. And then let's drive into like, what are use cases in areas that AI really can actually drive value within your organization, right? Let's get beyond this sort of buzz into like the meat. So that's where I'd say like a lot of start with education, right? Dive into like, get an understanding. But I'd say the other thing, the challenge is that for most organizations, where do I start? Like, where do I start, right? Or I've started and I don't know where to go next. And I can assure you, despite all the messaging you're hearing, you're not actually the last person on the planet to be adopting AI fully in your contact center. Okay. Like there's a lot of, this is very early stages of it. And so no matter what marketing and marketers tell you, you're not the last one, I promise you. But the answer of like where you start is really unsexy, right? It depends. That's the answer. And there is no singular path to AI in the contact center or your CX. What kind of points of friction do you have in your customer journeys? What kinds of use cases do you have that can be improved in your environment? What's the function of your contact center? Is this revenue or cost? Who are your customers? What do they need? We start honing in on some of these types of questions. Now we can start to zero in on the right place to start. And then I'd say the last thing that we hear often, right, is companies are wrestling with, this has been, I'd say, more of a newer phenomenon, but how do you move forward when there's a lot of internal stakeholders? I.e., this is like massive decision by committee time. Like there's a lot of inertia, right? This is new and disruptive technology. There's a lot of fear right now of making bad decisions we see within companies. So there's this like, we're stuck. We don't know where to go. We don't know what to do. So this is where we spend a lot of time talking with customers about, look, we got to build a game plan. Let's have a strategy. Let's prioritize, then let's start creating action around those. Otherwise everyone's looking, it's kind of like the Spider-Man meme where everyone's like pointing at each other, right? Like You know, like who's up next? What do we do? So, an ROI is a big component to that. So the business case, a huge part of the equation here, right? All of this technology we're talking about with AI too is accessible to all orgs, right? From the very small business to the enterprise, but it all does still cost money, resources, and time. So you need a good game plan of like, how do we approach it? So we do spend a lot of time with customers hearing that they really suck, right? They just don't know where to move. And so how do you do this with the group? Well, you do this with a process, right? You have a process in place and you run through that process to figure out ultimately where are the pieces where AI fits in your CX strategy. And this is a marathon, not a sprint. Oftentimes you go through that process multiple times, right? So that's, I think, getting people internally on the same page is a key part of this where it breaks down for a lot of companies.
No, I appreciate that, Mike. I think one of the biggest highlights I get out of it is it's never too late. You're not too far behind, regardless of what technology you're using today or what technologies. And frankly speaking, there's a quick way to get to that perfect level of CX. It's just a matter of sitting down and digesting everything. But Whitney, how about from your perspective, what are companies why are companies maintaining the status quo?
Yeah, well, just to add on to what Mike was talking about a bit, this is why companies like InflowCX exist, right? Is because you can help guide these businesses and companies to understand how can you customize components of AI and incorporate those into your business in order to solve your specific business challenges and your goals. And so what comes to mind for me is this phrase, like, not all AI is created equal, right? And it depends on your company and your goals and whether or not you are an early adopter or just starting to dip your toe in. But those are certainly things I think, your company does a great job doing. But, what I see with companies in terms of maintaining the status quo is companies are trying to do the best they can with the technology that they know about, right? You don't know what you don't know, sure. But what we see when companies start to come to customer with a K, our company, is that they've put together sort of this technology Frankenstack approach for everything that's CX related. And they have these disparate third-party systems, and they're kind of merged together in a wonky fashion. And it kind of has allowed them to get a little bit closer to what that perfect vision of CX is like, but not quite. And that kind of goes back to the poll, right? Is on average, what we've seen is between 5 and 7 different systems that an agent has to reference in order to best serve a customer. So they're popping out to, a separate chat functionality. They're popping out to an order management system or a membership database or the billing background system. So instead of doing that, there's a way that you can unify that data. But not having the data unified in a single place makes it incredibly difficult for agents to understand who these customers are and get a full picture of who they are. And so what we hear a lot, right, when we call a contact center or web chat in is, bear with me while I look up your information, or give me a few moments so I can review your profile, or things like that. What those agents are doing are they're frantically jumping from one system to the next and copying your order number and things like that. So I think it's really important for businesses to consider this idea of the total experience. So we think about different personas, right? There's the customer experience, but there's also agents that we need to focus on, and ensuring that those agents can be effective and efficient, and being able to offer them tools to do that, to improve efficiencies. It can, in turn decrease agent turnover because they're happier. They can more efficiently serve their customers. They're saving time and money. So I think some of those can certainly be roadblocks to why companies are slow to adopt new technologies, is probably because they don't know what they don't know at this point.
Yeah, no, I think there's data and studies that show that happy agents equal happy customers. So there is a waterfall effect that certainly broadcasts itself out there. But Mike, back to you. If you could maybe tell us about how InflowCX companies are investing in CX and looking for ways to incorporate AI into those particular practices.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple examples that we've recently worked on with customers or are working on. So we engaged a large hospitality customer about a year ago, and they were trying to move from, again, what when you talked about a lot of disparate, the Frankenstack, right, of things. And they're like, we know we need to have a more comprehensive CX strategy and tech strategy. We're on some legacy, technologies here, and here's where we're trying to go. So we were helping them craft this story as we went through kind of discoveries with them and understanding use cases and interviewing different stakeholders. We actually found with them pretty early into the process that they had a really like immediate need for some self-service, voice self-service, right? And so that actually we peeled that out of the broader project. Say, we need to hit this right now. You guys are really honestly like hemorrhaging money and customers. Let's fix this piece right now in the context of the broader, CX strategy that we're working on with you guys. So that was a great example though of like massive impact for them. They actually didn't even, again, don't know what you don't know. They were not going into this saying we need to buy this to solve problems, but it was uncovered and came out, and it was like, this needs to be addressed. And they agree this needs to be addressed immediately. So that was a great kind of voice self-service opportunity we helped them with. On another one, we recently helped a e-commerce customer that was really like, we did a conversation intelligence kind of analysis with them, right? So like, what are interactions and conversations having, like what's going on? Because they're like, we've never mined that data. So again, use AI with this structured data now of all these interactions going on, digital and voice, and uncovered some really massive gaps in their customer journey that they had no idea about, right? Like I'm talking huge impact on things. For basically getting products into the hands of customers, and where was that breaking down? So it highlighted challenges in the CX, but actually the problems needed to be fixed in other parts, right? Supply chain and other process things. And so again, this is something that would be kind of behind the scenes, I guess, to a lot of customers, right? But it's now giving them data to fix internal problems they didn't realize they had, and which is a kind of a good segue. So there's a couple examples of just recent ones that we've worked on. Like if you zoom out from that, going back into the kind of there's AI, like let's break this down. Like I think for us, and this is my perspective on it, right? I think of AI and CX as like two areas really. You've got sort of customer facing applications of it and company facing. Customer facing, like voice and digital self-service, right? Chatbots, conversational AI, you call in, you're asking, instead of like an IVR that makes you want to press 0 repeatedly, like you're having a good conversation of getting information. And maybe it's information that then passes you to an agent that can serve you quicker, or maybe you're just resolving it completely. And same on the digital side, right? Maybe you don't even need to talk to anyone or chat with anyone or SMS message with anyone because you get it solved. Or maybe that then parlays into a live agent conversation that then is more expeditiously handled, right? So that's sort of the side that the customer immediately feels and sees and knows, like, oh, I'm working with a chatbot, I'm working with a voice bot. The other side of it is even broader, the company facing side, I'll call it, right? This is agent assist. This is intelligent routing, right? This is conversation intelligence or interaction analytics, quality management, right? In leveraging AI and automation around, what are all these interactions and how do I coach my team better? What insights do I get about my customers? Knowledge management, when you talked about that, right? Like these are all things that are kind of more, let's call them internally facing. The important thing is both of these buckets, right? The very overtly customer facing and the inward facing AI applications in contact center impact the customer and the company, both of them, right? Yep. We're seeing employee, Whitney talked about this, and I don't think this can be overstated, the impact on employees, right? Of enabling agents to handle the less mundane and the more important stuff and not burning them out with little things, arming them with better ability to serve customers. And I would say, if you look at like where are we seeing companies invest, it's kind of it's both buckets, right? It depends. It goes back to that. It depends where people start. I would say there's not like this is the only path you start here and then move there. It's like sometimes people start more on inward stuff and then move towards outward, and sometimes it's the opposite. And oftentimes it's a blend of both.
I appreciate that, Mike. That's a very thorough response with a lot of detail. And Whitney, I'm excited to get your response. Before we do, we've got one more poll. This is our last poll that will pop up here. In this particular poll, which of these AI-powered channels is most important to your business priorities? So a handful of different options there. We'll leave this up for about 10 seconds. And while you guys are filling that out, just a quick note, we have a few questions that have been populated in here. So thank you very much. Keep those coming. We'll get to those here in just a minute. But meantime, let's go ahead and close that poll out in 3, 2, 1. Let's see what our results are. It is a multi-choice question. So
Yep.
looks like conversational AI is right there at the top, closely followed by a handful of these other factors we've mentioned. So
Yeah.
Whitney, over to you. How are customer with a K clients prioritizing AI?
Yeah, I wanted to just touch on two of the things that Mike talked about, because he kind of broke it down into internal AI tools and external AI tools, or direct customer facing. But at the end of the day, all of it really does impact the customer experience. And so I'll certainly want to focus on chatbots. And customer clients have reduced costs by 88% because of this conversation automation with chatbots. So just to kind of put that into perspective, Glovo is a client of ours. They're a delivery platform based out of Spain, and they came to Kustomer because at the time they did not have a unified way to view their customers. They were rapidly expanding. They were, their customer base was growing. They were growing internationally. They grew the number of their couriers, their delivery drivers. And of course, they naturally had a number of more customer inquiries. So what they did was they implemented Kustomer's AI-powered customer self-service solution. And with that, they were able to automatically resolve 85% of customer service inquiries without agent intervention. And so, of course, that's, it's an amazing use case. And you can imagine how much money was saved by allowing customers to self-serve instead of escalating those conversations to a live agent, like Mike was saying. Not only is that a waste of money, but it also is could be a very mundane task for your agents. So I think that something to keep in mind is that although chatbots can still serve an important function to, collect pieces of information and be able to allow customers to self-serve fully, it's also incredibly valuable to capture things like a member ID or order number or the reason for them reaching out. If it does need to be escalated to a live agent, what's valuable and impactful for customer experience is when that conversation is seamless and the agent can pick up where the chatbot left off, right? So it's seamless in the eyes of the consumer, and that agent has contextual information to go off of. And then the other point I want to draw attention to is sort of on the back end, like the agent AI features and functionalities, right? So queuing and routing, it's not a super sexy approach to anything, but it is a huge issue with today's existing legacy ticketing-based solutions or case-based solutions, because those are siloed tickets. They're siloed cases. You do not have an entire view of the customer. So intelligent routing has the ability to automatically route these conversations, for example, by topic or level of difficulty or even language in some cases. And you're getting past this round robin assignment and allowing agents to cherry pick, guess what, the easiest conversations out of the bunch. And instead, you're ensuring that those agents have a steady flow of work based on their level, based on their area of expertise, and you're improving the customer experience. So one of our clients, Going.com, formerly Scott's Cheap Flights, they routed conversations to specific teams. They had email teams, they had chat teams, and they used custom queues and routing to ensure that they were addressing time-sensitive content more rapidly. And so doing this really did have a huge impact on their CSAT scores. So I think that those are just two areas that teams can focus on.
No, that's fantastic data points there from you both. And Whitney and Mike, I appreciate both of your time. We are going to move on to the Q&A. This fireside chat has been very hot, much like here in the Midwest, but lots of great information and data to come out of this. But we'll jump in. And Whitney and Mike, by the way, I don't. Some of these questions are really just general towards both of you. So if you guys just want to jump in as you feel fit. But the first question here is, with your comments on omni, not multi-channel, I think that is interesting because we have so many vendors that specialize in communication. Do you recommend one vendor to manage SMS, CRM, et cetera?
Yeah, but I'll jump in for that. That's certainly a challenge that we see often with customers and prospects who are visiting customer with a K, right? They're saying, we've got 4, 5, 7, I've heard up to 11 different systems that are all, most of them, maybe not all of them, but most of them are necessary for those agents to reference in order to serve their customers. On top of that, there's these various digital channels that I referenced earlier, and it seems like there's more and more that keep coming out. There's new ways that customers can communicate with a company, and it's up to those companies to determine which are the most effective forms of communication. How can we support customers on those channels from a customer support standpoint? So going from this, omni-channel versus multi-channel, the difference between them is, from an omni-channel perspective, you can seamlessly switch between those channels. So I personally, maybe I'm biased, but I do think that there is a huge importance in first being able to unify the data from those third-party sources into a single pane of glass for your agents so they can more efficiently and effectively serve customers, and be able to personalize those conversations because they see that 360-degree view of the customer at a quick glance. So understanding where your customer data lives is super valuable, and having it in a single place is even more valuable.
Yeah, Mike, it was a very concise answer, which is great. Mike, anything to add to that around that question?
I think Whitney's right. I mean, there's a desire to try to consolidate. I don't think there's this perfect silver bullet of anything for, so it is consolidating data, trying to simplify things. But I would say you're not doing something necessarily wrong if there are some level of different tech. It's common to have multiple tech things. How do you unify that from a customer experience and from an employee experience as much as you can? So I don't know that it'll ever get there fully, because there's so much depth within the specialties of these parts of the products. So it's a good question, though. It's something people wrestle with. I would say what drives most of it is, what are you working with today? And then is there a particular sort of bias in the company of trying to, because there's usually trade-offs, right? Like you can have more best of breed in certain areas, but then you have potentially more complexity of integrations and administration versus potentially having more all in one, but then you trade off maybe some of the feature functionality. So,
yeah. Well, we have a handful of questions. I'll just pick and choose some of the better questions here. They're all great, but the next question here is, how do you use generative AI to anticipate objections?
Yeah, I can add my 2 cents for that. Is, first of all, generative AI wouldn't be a webinar about AI without referencing that. So thank you for the person who posed that question. I think generative AI, there's a lot of ways that you can incorporate that into a customer experience offering. And so some of those ways can allow agents to be more productive through, offering suggestions like the question had outlined around objections, or that next suggested step. So those kind of suggestions around agent skills can be really valuable. But I also think that, generative AI, incorporating that on the front end as well, can be really valuable. So, customer service as it relates to chatbots and incorporating natural language when interacting with customers, and then being able to capture the data around that and take action on the data. So I think those are some of my thoughts right now about generative AI.
Let's Mike, if you have anything to add, great. Otherwise, we'll jump to the next one. Yeah. Next question here is, what evidence do we have that customers actually like chatbots? They tend to frustrate me and lead to additional questions. and wasted time. Also, can you elaborate on how AI can solve supply chain internal process issues? So breaking that into two questions.
Yeah.
The first one is is there data that shows that chatbots are effective, and do people actually like them?
It's a great question, right? And I'm actually with you in a lot of cases. So here's what I'd say. Customers actually, for what I've seen and understood, and again, I'm not a deep research data scientist, so I don't have research after research to prove this out, but kind of talking with customers and understanding how things are working kind of out in the real world, I'd say customers actually care about just getting their problem solved or needs helped. That's what they actually care about, and they care less about how that's done. I mean, meaning they want to engage on the channel of their choice, but if that's a chatbot or human, as long as I get what I need done quickly and efficiently, and it's minimal friction for me, I don't care. That's actually, and I think what you're pointing to is a lot of chatbots and a lot of self-service things are not set up that way. And that's one of the big barriers that companies have to get over. Great. It's good for you that you deflected 80% of your calls. You pissed off also 80% of those 80% you deflected. Is that success? I don't think so, actually. So this is where it comes into really design and thoughtfulness, and actually a lot of like iteration and tuning, and understanding your customer. So I agree with you that there's a lot of people that have bad feelings on bots because of experiences just like this that actually companies have to overcome. And we as an industry and as a collective have to do a lot better here, because first wave of this stuff is just like, hey, that's great for the company for efficiency. It's terrible for experience. That's not success. That's not sustainable either. You're not going to have customers to serve at some point in time. On the second part too, this customer on the supply chain. So this is going back to conversation intelligence that surface us other problems. So this customer, we basically helped them mine all of these interactions going on. Now they, of course, their agents were closing cases with customers, but they were marking them as whatever they mark them as, right? Agents do this sometimes. When we layered in conversational intelligence into actually what are these conversations, what are some of the themes coming out? One of the big themes was shipping and RMA issues, right? And for this particular customer, that was not a subfield, that was not a drop down, and they had no idea how big quantifying that issue was. So able to quantify it. So they were never capturing that anyway, right? So their agents were like, hey, was this type of issue, whatever. So that was able to really expose that type of issue for them. And again, CX, the CS team was taking the brunt of these challenges. What it really was there were some other kind of workflow and supply chain issues within the company that needed some attention, that were not being raised to the level that the company needed to raise them because they didn't know it was that big of a problem. And so mining those customer conversations allowed them to realize, oh, this is a big problem. We need to put effort and energy here. So that's how those tied together.
Yeah. I'll add on to that because I can definitely empathize with getting frustrated with chatbots, right? Especially the chatbots. When are you frustrated with those though, right? Is when you have to exert a lot more effort in identifying who you are or repeating yourself, or, now you're transferred to a live agent via chat and you have to say the whole thing over again. Additional questions, wasted time. That can happen, but I think, to Mike's point, it really goes back to how these chatbots are designed and where do you offer them and in what channels do you offer them? Because the average consumer allows a brand to make 3 mistakes before going to the competitor. Okay, 3 mistakes. And that can happen so rapidly. So it's really important to get that right from a self-service perspective. And, I think what goes into this also is incorporating customer data in order to make those conversations more personalized. So the true value of capturing customer data is what you do with it. How do you make it actionable? How do you use that data to be proactive in, reaching out to a bank member saying, yes, you've been approved for this loan, or, on on the internal side, maybe alerting a customer support representative about something that where they can be more knowledgeable. Like there's a membership renewal coming up, or a delayed shipment, or it's this person's birthday this month. So really, I think that there's a lot that can go into making a good chatbot. And that really boils down to, how are you housing the customer data, and how can you make that data actionable?
Perfect. Thank you both for those responses. And we'll get wrapped up here, and maybe we can keep this to more of a brief response for this last question we have. But last question we'll answer here for the folks is, where do you see your customers focusing their initial efforts and introducing AI into their customer journey?
I'll start this one, Whitney, and I would say 60% of where I see customers starting is more on the customer facing side, and 40% is probably more on the internal facing side. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying that's what I'm typically seeing. I think part of it is the customer facing side. They want to show results, right, more readily to the customers, right? Now, I think the challenge is sometimes people jump into that and we have the bad chatbot experience. So you have to just be careful. There's not a right or wrong. I would say generally you have to have, Whitney's mentioned this word a lot, you have to have good data to know where to start, honestly, right? You need to know what's working, what's broken, what's not. If you don't know use cases to self-serve your customers, and believe it or not, there are companies that don't, you got to start there. We need to gather data first, right? So maybe it is more of like a back-end conversation intelligence exercise. Let's look at tech to help us solve that problem. So then we can figure out what to offer to customers on the front end. And then you create that kind of loop of, okay, now we're serving, what are the sentiments of self-service? Are those good? Do we need to tweak things? Are people falling out of the chatbot here, getting frustrated? How's our CSAT trending over time? So it is all kind of in some degree circular. So where you enter, just, it depends, but I would say it's slightly more on the front end self-service side than on the back end side. That's what I'm seeing, but it's pretty even. And either way, you're going to need to address both sides usually to get the complete story and the benefit your company's going to want to drive towards. So that's kind of like the it depends answer, I guess, to an extent, but hopefully that adds some color, Kirk.
I agree. I think historically, again, when we look back 10 years or so, that, the preferred channel of choice may have been voice, but today, maybe there's other channels that are more preferred, depends on who you're talking about, right? Who is this consumer? So I would say that, chatbots is something that we see a lot in terms of how can we, it's chatbots as it relates to cost savings as well. So how can we make our current agent headcount more effective and, resist the urge to have to balloon up that headcount just because we're growing as a company and we're growing the number of our members or our customers. We're getting more inquiries, but how can we allow, those customers to self-serve, for example, or again, on the back end, it's making those agents more effective. So the second thing would definitely be personalization. I think that this really can be one of the most powerful technology investments that a company can make to influence their CX costs, as well as just the customer experience as a whole, is how can you personalize the customer journey? And there's so many different points in that journey, right? But again, I know that we've kind of talked about this point a lot, but the way that you can personalize is ensuring that you have the customer data unified in a single place.
No, it's a great answer. I can certainly attest that when I call in somewhere and they know who I am, what I'm calling about, and they address my questions in the best fashion, it's almost like this, that was kind of delightful.
The stars align.
Right. As opposed to when you have that bad experience where you call into somewhere, you get routed to all these different folks, then you try to chat and you say, hey, I just called in yesterday. They have no idea who you are. I mean, it's just a very frustrating experience across the board, and it leaves a really bad taste in your mouth. Well, Whitney Ondrejcka from Kustomer and Mike Dolloff from InflowCX, thank you both very much for sitting down next to the fire on this hot day in August. For everybody who joined us, thank you so much for joining us and sticking with us. The questions were great. If we didn't answer your questions, by all means, feel free to funnel those over to us. We'll see you on the next go round. And for those of you who did win the Yeti coolers, we'll be in touch with you here shortly.
Yeah.
Thanks again, and we'll look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.